With a rising number of natural gas explosions in Illinois, including one in Woodstock Monday and one in Rockford last week, state leaders try to pass legislation to prevent further disasters.
This is a life and public safety issue that we can no longer ignore.
Hundreds of lives are disrupted every year because of natural gas explosions. That's why one state senator wants to pass a law which could prevent future disasters and save lives.
The way to combat natural gas explosions is to invest in a life-saving device.
Gas safety expert Julie Harris with Denova Detect says natural gas detectors should be installed at ceiling level where natural gas rises.
We do yearly reminders to replace batteries and smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. Going through your house and assessing where do you have risks that would be kind of that catastrophic structure.
New legislation introduced by State Senator Craig Wilcox requires natural gas detectors in every room containing an appliance fueled by propane or natural and petroleum gases.
We need to make sure that people are aware and educate themselves, preventing it in the first place with a natural gas alarm and taking it as a proactive step.
Woodstock is the latest community shocked by an explosion, displacing at least 11 people. Just last week, a vacant home in Rockford was leveled by an explosion.
When that catastrophe isn't forefront, what are you doing to make sure that you have a plan and resources?
Working for you in Rockford, Sydney Stuffragan, 23 News.
Several GoFundMes have been set up to support the people impacted by Monday's Woodstock home explosion.